On the 7th of November, 1989, Flight MH192 of Malaysian Airlines departed from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Kathmandu. Aboard were 167 souls, passengers and crew alike. At the helm was Captain Rajiv Chandra, a seasoned aviator of 47 years, boasting 15,000 hours of flight time, including over 2,000 hours of instrument flying time, 1,000 navigating the treacherous Himalayan expanse. His co-pilot was 30-year-old Li Wei, a gifted pilot who had transitioned to commercial aviation after a distinguished decade of service in the Royal Malaysian Air Force. That day, the Himalayas were engulfed by one of the most ferocious storms of the decade. Meteorologists recorded wind gusts reaching 120 kilometers per hour and a precipitous drop in barometric pressure. The air temperature at an altitude of 7,000 meters plummeted to a chilling -58 degrees Celsius. Despite these formidable conditions, Flight MH192 received clearance for departure, as forecasts predicted a significant improvement in weather by the time they reached the Himalayan region. The final radio exchange with the aircraft occurred at 1843 local time. Captain Chandra reported entering an area of severe turbulence and requested permission to alter their flight altitude. "This is MH12, he transmitted, entering heavy turbulence, requesting clearance to descend to 7,600. The transmission abruptly cut off mid-sentence. The aircraft vanished from radar screens, as if dissolved into the very air between the towering mountain peaks. A search operation was immediately launched, but it was severely hampered by the appalling weather. 8 helicopters and 12 ground teams scoured the suspected crash zone for 3 weeks, yielding no results. In one of the most inaccessible areas of the Himalayas, where peaks pierce the sky at altitudes exceeding 7,000 meters, the plane seemed to have been swallowed by the earth. A month later, Nepalese authorities officially suspended the search, declaring all 167 passengers and crew members lost. Among the passengers were tourists from 14 nations, a contingent of Buddhist monks en route to their annual pilgrimage, and the renowned Himalayan mountaineer Johann Steiner, accompanied by a team of 5. For the families of the missing, years of agonizing uncertainty and fleeting hope ensued. For 34 years, the mystery of flight MH192 remained unsolved until June of 2023, when an international climbing expedition, led by Alex Mackenzie, set out to conquer the eastern face of Kangchenjunga, the world's 3rd highest peak. The group comprised 5 individuals: Mackenzie himself, a 60-year-old Scot with 20 years of Himalayan climbing experience; Anna Sokolova, a 38-year-old Kazakhstani mountaineer who had summited all of the world's 14 8,000-meter peaks; James Hope, an Australian doctor and climber; Minho Park, a South Korean photographer and high-altitude filming specialist; and Chairing Sherpa, a 3rd-generation Nepalese guide. The expedition's initial objective was to test a novel route on the eastern face, a section previously deemed impassable due to avalanche risk. All prior attempts to chart a path through this area had ended in failure, with 4 climbers losing their lives in various years while attempting this very route. Local inhabitants referred to this part of the mountain as Kor Ka, the wheel of the goddess of death, in the Tibetan dialect. According to an ancient legend, the mountain goddess concealed a gateway to the afterlife here, a passage for departing souls. As they ascended, their compasses began exhibiting erratic behavior, as if an unseen force within the mountain was distorting the magnetic field. GPS navigators intermittently lost signal, despite a perfectly clear sky. The team initially attributed these anomalies to the unique geological composition of the mountain, perhaps a high concentration of iron or other metals. At dawn on the 3rd day of their ascent, as the group established camp on a narrow ledge at an altitude of 6,200 meters, Anna Sokolova observed peculiar avian activity. A vast flock of Himalayan vultures, a rare sight at such altitudes, circled in thermal updrafts above a steep slope, approximately half a kilometer from their camp. Among them, 2 individuals stood out, significantly larger than the rest, Himalayan eagles with wingspans reaching up to 3 meters. The peculiarity lay not only in the presence of these predatory birds at such an extreme altitude, but also in their peculiar flight pattern. The eagles seemed to trace the same figure repeatedly in the air, returning to a specific point on the slope as if attempting to draw the climber's attention. Upon seeing the birds, Chiring Sherpa grew visibly pale and adamantly refused to proceed along the planned route. When pressed by the concerned climbers, he initially responded evasively, but eventually shared a local legend. His grandfather, he explained, spoke of the Rat-Ka, guardians who took the form of great birds, protecting places where the realms of the living and the dead intersected. When the Rat-Ka began circling a particular spot, it signified their guardianship of souls trapped between worlds. Despite the prevailing skepticism, the eagle's unusual behavior piqued Mackenzie's interest. Such actions were uncharacteristic of birds unless they had discovered a substantial food source. The team decided to deviate from their planned route to investigate what had captivated the eagle's attention. At worst, they reasoned, they would lose a couple of hours. This change in trajectory led the climbers to a steep, icy slope culminating in a precipice. As they approached the very spot around which the eagles had been circling, the birds' behavior intensified. They descended to within mere meters of the climbers' heads, only to soar upwards again. Suddenly, one of the eagles plunged downwards, embedding itself deep into the snow, about 3 meters from the group. As the climbers cautiously approached, the bird took flight, but a deep crater remained in the snow. Minho Park retrieved his ice axe and began to clear the snow. At a depth of approximately 1 meter, his axe struck something hard with a metallic clang. Another 15 minutes of excavation revealed a piece of white fuselage adorned with a distinctive blue and red stripe, the signature livery of Malaysian Airlines. The climbers could scarcely believe their eyes. Before them lay the wreckage of a passenger plane at an altitude exceeding 6,000 meters, in a location previously considered inaccessible even to the most experienced mountaineers. Their immediate thought was to contact rescue services, but their satellite communication abruptly failed. All devices indicated full battery power, yet no signal could be established. The team decided to expand their excavation to ascertain the scale of their discovery. Over the next 4 hours, the group worked diligently, clearing snow around the initial fragment of fuselage. By evening, they had unearthed a section of the aircraft's body, complete with 4 portholes, and the inscription MH192 emblazoned on its side. It was the very same Malaysian flight that had vanished without a trace 34 years prior. It became starkly clear why it had never been found. It had crashed in a location deemed utterly inaccessible. No helicopter could have hovered at such an altitude in the thin air, and ground teams would never have reached this slope, as it led to no recognizable summit. The following morning, after a restless night spent near the wreckage, the climbers resumed their excavation. By noon, they discovered a rupture in the fuselage, wide enough for a person to squeeze through into the aircraft's interior. Alex Mackenzie and Anna Sokolova, being the most experienced members of the group, decided to venture inside while the others continued clearing snow from the exterior. Inside the aircraft, time seemed to have stood still. Oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling, and half-finished meals remained on the tables, some with newspapers bearing images of the Berlin Wall shortly before its fall. The climbers moved with extreme caution, mindful of disturbing the fragile equilibrium of the debris. In the front row of the passenger cabin, they discovered a bag containing climbing gear. Within it lay an ice axe bearing the initials J.L., those of Johann Steiner, the renowned mountaineer who had been aboard. Lying beside it was his passport and a remarkably well-preserved leather-bound notebook. When Mackenzie opened the notebook, a chill ran down his spine at what he saw. It was a journal Steiner had kept following the disaster, with the last entry dated December 16, 1989, more than a month after the aircraft's disappearance. Johann Steiner's journal unveiled a harrowing tale of survival. Out of 170 individuals, only 47 survived the first night. The majority perished on impact when the plane slammed into the mountainside amidst the snowstorm. Captain Chandra was among the survivors and assumed command. He organized a makeshift shelter from the fuselage debris, rationed the discovered food supplies, and implemented a strict water conservation policy. Steiner wrote that the plane had veered off course due to a peculiar magnetic anomaly, causing all instruments to fail simultaneously. The pilots were flying virtually blind. Minutes before the crash, the captain had witnessed a strange luminescence on the mountainside, as if the mountain itself were glowing from within. He had attempted to maneuver away, but it was too late. Subsequent entries chronicled their struggle for survival in the extreme conditions, with temperatures dropping to -45 degrees Celsius at night. On the fifth day after the catastrophe, the survivors noticed the peculiar behavior of the birds. Enormous eagles began circling the crash site. On the seventh day, something extraordinary occurred. One of the eagles dropped a mountain goat at their shelter. The animal was deceased but still warm. Initially, the survivors believed it to be a coincidence, but the next day the bird returned with another carcass. It seemed the eagles were deliberately providing sustenance for the humans. Captain Chandra asserted that in his 20 years of flying over the Himalayas, he had never encountered anything like it. The eagles continued to bring food to the survivors for the next 2 weeks, saving them from certain starvation by late November. However, conditions worsened dramatically. Heavy snowfall completely buried the wreckage, transforming it into an icy tomb. The supply of oxygen cylinders dwindled, and many survivors suffered from severe altitude sickness. An entry dated December 4th stated that 3 more had died that day, leaving only 18 individuals. Captain Chandra declared that they needed to descend, or all would perish. He proposed cutting a tunnel through the snow to reach the outside. The eagles circled overhead constantly, as if trying to communicate with the people. The last entry in the journal was brief and ominous. "We've cut through the tunnel. We're out. The captain says we must descend the southeast slope. The eagles have flown away for some reason. I saw that strange glow on the rocks again last night. It seems to pulsate, like a living heart. The local monks in our group say it is the light of transition, a path to another dimension. I don't know if I believe it, but I have no other explanations. If anyone finds this journal, know this. We fought until the end and never gave up." The climbers were astonished. It turned out that some passengers had survived the crash and were attempting to descend the mountain. But what happened to them afterward? Why was no one ever found? And what role did the eagles play in all of this? Continuing their investigation of the aircraft in the cockpit, they discovered something else peculiar. On November 28th, he noted that the compass was still behaving erratically, its needle spinning uncontrollably, sometimes counterclockwise. All electronic devices that they managed to power up from the emergency generator displayed gibberish. The altimeter had plunged into negative readings, indicating -2,000 meters, despite their clear altitude of no less than 6,000 meters. The thermometer fluctuated wildly between +35 and -6, without any discernible pattern. At night, the radio operator attempted to activate the emergency transmitter and swore he heard voices in an unknown language through his headphones. "This place seems to distort," he wrote, referring to a strange phenomenon he had witnessed along with the surviving monks the previous night. "That glow has reappeared on the slope. The monks are performing some ritual, chanting mantras. They say it is a gateway between worlds, and that those who pass through it will be granted a new life in another dimension." Though a man of science, the captain no longer disbelieved. After all they had endured, he was prepared to consider any possibility. If they could not descend, perhaps it was worth risking to investigate what lay beyond that light. By evening of the same day, in the tail section of the aircraft, the climbers discovered something even more remarkable. The emergency exit had been opened from the inside, and scattered around it on the floor were dozens of bird feathers. Some of them belonged to Himalayan eagles, as confirmed by Minho Park, an ornithology enthusiast. The feathers were arranged in a peculiar pattern resembling a spiral. At the center of the spiral lay a small metallic object, which turned out to be an ancient Tibetan amulet depicting a winged creature. Later, Chiring explained that it was a symbol of the Ratika, the guardian spirits who assumed the form of giant birds. As the climbers continued clearing snow from the exterior, they uncovered tracks leading away from the plane down the slope. These were the remnants of the snow tunnel Steiner had written about. The tunnel led to the edge of a precipice and abruptly ended at a sheer ice wall over 500 meters high. Descending there without specialized equipment was impossible. It remained unclear what had happened to the survivors if they had taken this path. They would inevitably have fallen from the cliff. However, their bodies should have been found at the bottom, yet there were no traces. That evening, as the team returned to the aircraft to spend the night within the wind-protected fuselage, something inexplicable occurred. James Hope's satellite phone, which had been inoperative all day, suddenly sprang to life and began emitting strange sounds. It wasn't normal communication, but rather a sequence of short and long beeps. akin to Morse code. Hope meticulously recorded this sequence, and upon the team's return to base camp, one of their assistants, a former radio operator, deciphered it. The message read, "We are alive, but not here." That night, the climbers observed the very same luminescence that Captain Chandra and Johann Steiner had written about. It materialized on the rock face approximately 300 meters from the aircraft, a pulsating bluish radiance similar to the aurora borealis, but concentrated in a single point. The light moved in a spiral, constricting towards the center. Most strangely, when their flashlights were directed at it, the beams of light seemed to bend and refract, as if passing through a denser medium. They decided to report their findings to the authorities. It was the last time they saw the eagles. The birds literally encircled them, forming a living ring in the air. One of them carried an object in its talons. The eagle swooped down and literally dropped the item at Alex Mackenzie's feet. It was a worn leather wallet. Inside lay Captain Rajiv Chandra's identification and a photograph of his family. On the back of the photograph was an inscription in his handwriting, "We pass through the light. New life. Look for us, not here." The date on the note was December 17th, 1989, the day after Steiner's final journal entry. 3 days later, the climbers descended to base camp and contacted the Nepalese authorities. Within a month, a massive expedition to the crash site was organized, involving rescuers, researchers, and representatives from Malaysian Airlines. They corroborated all of Mackenzie's findings, but could not further unravel the mystery of the missing survivors. Anomalies persisted during the official expedition as well. All electronic devices malfunctioned. Near the aircraft, compasses pointed to random directions, and GPS navigators located their position with errors spanning several kilometers. Meteorologists recorded unusually high levels of electromagnetic radiation around the crash site, but could not explain its source. Geologists discovered that the rock beneath the aircraft contained an exceptionally high concentration of rare earth metals, including gadolinium and neodymium, known for their powerful magnetic properties. However, these anomalies failed to account for the described luminescence or the strange behavior of the eagles. Analysis of the black box, recovered from the wreckage, revealed that immediately before the crash, the aircraft had entered an area of intense electromagnetic anomaly. All instruments failed simultaneously, and communication was severed. The captain's last words, recorded by the flight recorder, were, "What is this light? It's right in front of us. Pull the stick?" The recording abruptly ended mid-sentence. Locals from the nearby Khumbu village shared with the researchers that, in their folklore, Mount Kangchenjunga had always been considered sacred and perilous. According to legends, its eastern face harbored a door between worlds, guarded by benevolent spirits in the guise of giant birds. Those who found this door at the moment of its opening could transition to another dimension, one free from suffering and death. Even more astonishingly, village elders claimed that approximately a month after the aircraft's disappearance, peculiar individuals appeared in the surrounding villages. They were not entirely local, nor entirely strangers. They spoke Nepali with a strong accent, possessed unusual appearances, and exhibited strange knowledge. These individuals resided in the villages for a few weeks before vanishing, embarking, as they put it, on a long journey eastward. DNA analysis of the feathers found in the aircraft yielded startling results. While most belonged to Himalayan eagles, some samples contained genetic markers that did not correspond to any known avian species. Scientists hypothesized this might have been a previously undiscovered population of birds adapted to life at extreme altitudes. The most striking discovery was made within Captain Chandra's personal effects. Tucked away in the pocket of his uniform jacket, they found a neatly folded sheet of paper bearing a detailed spiral-shaped drawing accompanied by intricate mathematical calculations describing its properties. Physicists who examined these notes were astounded. The equations described a theoretical model of a space-time tunnel, or wormhole, concepts that only began to gain traction in modern quantum physics in the 2000s, 2 decades after the catastrophe. The mystery of Flight MH192 remains unresolved to this day. The official investigation concluded that the aircraft crashed due to a combination of extreme weather conditions and the failure of navigation equipment, triggered by a natural geomagnetic anomaly. The fate of the survivors who departed the aircraft on December 16, 1989, remains undetermined. No bodies were found on the mountain slopes or beneath the cliff where the tunnel, dug in the snow, led. Alex Mackenzie and his team achieved international renown following their discovery and continue to investigate the enigma of Flight MH192, gathering testimonies and studying archives. Mackenzie visited the families of several passengers, including Captain Chandra's widow. She recounted that a week before the ill-fated flight, her husband shared a peculiar dream with her. He dreamt he was flying through a brilliant tunnel of light, accompanied by giant birds with human eyes. At the end of the tunnel, he saw another world, beautiful and peaceful. Upon waking, he had said, "If anything happens to me, know this: I will not die. I will simply transition to another place." A year after the discovery of the crash site, Minho Park published a book, Wings Above the Abyss, dedicated to the expedition. In one of the photographs, taken on the final day at the aircraft, something inexplicable was accidentally captured. Against the backdrop of the blue sky above the wreckage, a massive eagle soared. However, upon magnification, its shadow on the snow revealed human contours. Scientists continue to study the magnetic anomaly in the crash vicinity. Every year, eagles return to the wrecked aircraft, as if guarding it from intruders. Local inhabitants now refer to the eastern face of Kangchenjunga not as the Wheel of Death, but as the Path of the Birds. They assert that on clear days, a peculiar shimmer can be seen from the summit, as if a gateway between worlds is opening there. In the villages below the mountain, tales are told of wanderers who appear as if from nowhere every few years. They do not speak of their past, but can predict the weather with uncanny accuracy and possess astonishing knowledge of the mountains. Frequently, unusual amulets are observed in their hands, metallic spirals resembling the one found by the climbers in the aircraft. Alex Mackenzie recently received a peculiar parcel with no return address. Inside lay a small silver pendant in the shape of an eagle with outstretched wings. Engraved on the back was a single phrase: "The path is open to those who believe. Seek us at sunrise." Captain Chandra's widow maintains that over the years, she has seen her husband in dreams on several occasions. He always says the same thing: "I am alive, but not here. The place where we are now is beautiful. Do not grieve for me." The mystery of flight. MH192 continues to captivate the minds of scientists and researchers. Was it a rare natural phenomenon, a manifestation of quantum physics, or something else entirely? Perhaps we will never know the truth. As one of the local monks remarked, some mountain mysteries exist not to be solved, but to remind us of the boundaries of human comprehension.